Hello and welcome to the skating lesson. I'm Dave Lees.
And I'm Jonathan Byer, and spring has sprung, Dave. World Championships and enter spring. This is
enter spring, enter deep V. I think we were a turtleneck last week. Yes, actually, the cherry blossoms are out. So I was thinking of going for a walk after we do this and looking at them, although they're in some of the dirtiest locations around here. But I'm like, do I want to go?
Just look up. Yeah, I love cherry blossoms. Yeah,
I love cherry blossoms too. Well, for those of you who are new here, please subscribe below. Remember to smash that like button. This, and that. We are going to be discussing everything going on in the figure skating world this week. A lot has happened. It's an interesting transient week. We're after Worlds, but in between the World Team Trophy. And for a lot of the top skaters, that means that they stay in Japan because they were in Japan for Worlds and they just remain there until the World Team Trophy, and they are doing Stars on Ice Japan. So very kind of a fascinating little time that goes on. And, looking at all their pictures for the show, very interesting. Yuzuru Hanyu doing Stars on Ice Japan. And a little plug, it was just announced that Yuzuru's show GIFT, which was his one-man show, which I think a lot of people watched on Disney Plus with a VPN and all of this stuff, which I didn't do just because we were so busy with life and everything else, but it is going to be shown worldwide with backstage interviews and rehearsal footage. So I imagine there will be subtitles or surtitles, as you love to say. But I'm excited to watch it.
Only if we're above. Yeah.
Listen, I mean, a platform like Disney Plus, I know everything is so splintered nowadays in terms of what people watch, but that's a really big opportunity if marketed in the appropriate way for, the sport to grow a bit and for his following to grow and do future shows. So I think it's fantastic that that's happening and on such a big platform. I mean, hopefully one day they'll get a big show on Netflix that's not just
silly,
right? It's something with grit and substance and, really grow the sport in that way. So yeah, and I'm always wondering how kids are going to get into the sport, right? Because we got into the sport when we were young little queens, right? Running around.
Ain't that true? Yeah.
How are the kids going to get in? I think it's great that it's on that platform. So I was like, from a marketing perspective, I thought that was
100%, because even like when I was visiting my nieces and stuff, and you turn on the skating, they're always immediately drawn in once it's there for them. Like they were big into following the red and green boxes, and they were, spinning around the living room, pretending they were part of it. So I think Disney Plus actually might be the perfect spot for it, for a parent to just say, oh, some skating. Let's just watch some skating. Yeah.
No, I'm a little ADHD. Are you? Or
I don't know. If I am, it's undiagnosed. Right. I have plenty of issues, but I don't know that
just think like all the bright colors, the costumes, Yuzuru coming down. I could just see like it's like catnip for someone.
Yeah. Well, and even in the still shots when he had like, I don't know if they were wings or something like that in one of the costumes, it just had that production value, as we know a lot of the ice shows don't, because they're sort of thrown together quickly and inexpensively. But this one seemed to be produced in the right way just from the stills alone. So I think the production value would be high, which always makes it better.
Oh, speaking of production value, I saw one of our favorite people this week.
Labezek.
She was in town. We had dinner together.
Amazing.
And, her hair was blown out. Yeah, I went to pick her up, right? Her hair was blown out. She was in her leather jacket. She has a lot of deep thoughts.
She's a vibe. Yeah.
She is a vibe, okay?
Yeah. One I try for personally. Yeah.
Yes, right? She has like so many great things. I don't want to like, you know what? We'll talk offline. I don't know what is safe to talk about and what's not. But
amazing. Okay. Are we allowed to say why she was in town?
I think it'll be announced in time. Let's not say why, right?
Great. Stay tuned,
right? But she's such like, I don't think she like means to be shady, but sometimes when she is, it's fantastic, right? It's just
because it comes from a place of not snark, but true belief. Like in her commentary, when she would say things like about Miki Ando, where she was like, she just doesn't care about that program. She just doesn't care about the beauty in that program. And I was like, yes, that could be perceived as outrageously shady, but she was speaking her truth and not in a vicious way. She was like, her focus is on the jumps and not the program. And that's what you see.
I've always died when Sandra and Scott are, well, we did this together, when they are dissecting Sarah Hughes's short program at the 2002 Olympics. And like the way Scott is just picking apart every jump and being like, well, this could have a deduction. And,
and worried about this. What did it, like a spin or closing the circular staff?
Closing the circle on the circular staff. And then the flip, I think 2 foot, right? They were talking, or the combo, and they're like, oh, little 2 foot on the landing. And like, they just listed like, boom, boom, boom. And then Sandra's like, she's happy.
She said, well, she's happy. Yeah. I appreciate, you saw a jubilant Sarah Hughes, they were picking it apart. And then she knows how to zoom out and be like, but for her, I guess that was a big success. So good for her. Yeah.
She has always defended that she meant she's happy. Like, yeah.
Yeah. For as much as we're nitpicking, like overall, her consensus was that went well. Yeah. And then she won a gold medal. So there you have it.
Joke's on us. So anyway, yes, just lots happening. So the Russians seem like they are coming back. As neutrals, the IOC has really played this. Thomas Bach has been such
this could go a myriad of ways.
A toxic partner for all of us.
A dangerous
you need a toxic partner who like gaslights you all the time and the circular conversations and all of these things, right? He has repeatedly said, oh, it's not about Paris 2024, letting the Russians back. Well, obviously letting the Russians back would in some way impact them being able to go to the 2024 Olympics, right? Like it's one of those circular conversations that a toxic person loves to have, right? People are talking about, the boycotts are letting Russians back. Well, we want to let it up to the individual federations to decide whether or not the Russians should come back. And you're like, huh? Right? Well, it comes out that they're now recommending to the federations to allow the Russians to come back as neutrals, but with these rules. They just were never explicit about what they were doing because they were kind of navigating the descent as they've been trying to navigate this, but it's clear that they always have had this in mind and have been just seeing how to maneuver it through. And
it's clear that no compromise will please either side. Right. Because even with this compromise of you can compete if you are neutral, and now was I correct in understanding, because we were reading some articles about the fencing federation. Yeah. Was that the fencing federation specifically that said, okay, you can compete if you're neutral and you do not have any involvement in law enforcement or armed forces? That
is what they're saying, right? I don't understand that. Like, I need to be more information.
That's not broad. That's just for fencing. It's clean.
Just for fencing.
Okay.
But I don't know what they're going to do with the figure skating, right? And obviously they're all state funded, but it goes into, are they supporting the war? There was that rally that happened at the Plushenko show. That was it was apparently, the skaters weren't known that they were going to do this in advance. However, it was like part war rally, part skating show.
And if I'm just my own personal feeling about the matter is I do feel that those skaters were sort of sideswiped with that.
I do think that they were.
Yeah, and maybe it sounds naive, but and they were so clearly livid that was happening and trying to post immediately to be like, whoa, this is
both Boykova and Tuktamisheva, did post immediately after that. And they've also been in a spot where they've had to rely completely on the Russian Federation for their income by doing these shows, which get grants from the government. So the Averbuk, Novka shows, Plushenko shows, they all are getting grants from Putin to put these shows on around the country over the last years, because remember, their finances are not the same what they were. The sponsorships are not the same. Some of these big banks and other things have sanctions on them. So they're all really dependent on the Russian Figure Skating Federation, which is financed by the Russian government, Channel 1, which is financed by the Russian government. They have no other way to keep skating and to earn a living because they don't have any training to do anything else, right? They are athletes at the end of the day. Coach or perform, really, for most of them right now. And in that sense, there is like a no-win situation. So I don't think funded by the state is going to be the determining factor. And I know that everyone's going to reply here, but they're state funded. That, yes, that's 100% true. But I don't think that that's what's going to determine if they're allowed back. I think if a skater was at the rallies with Putin, that gets into a different kind of scenario.
Because did they ever clarify how one proves that they are neutral? That it's such a messy sort of terminology, because what makes one neutral or not, and even in sort of the Russian Gaslight Committee with all of their comments, I actually agreed with Tarasova a little bit. If you're in that position and making that comment, she was like, listen, the athletes have got to go any way they can.
Yeah, of course.
It's important for them to compete. So what I'm reading through between the lines is, so if you have to say neutral and you have to say the war is bad, just go do it and just go compete. As opposed to, you see others that are like, never should we have to do that. And this resilience and this anger and resistance towards doing anything like that. I just don't know how you begin to decide athlete A is neutral and athlete B is not.
I find them to be, again, I find Russia and their skating establishment to be the toxic partner in figure skating that we all have. Because every time this happens, it's happened at multiple Olympics when Russia was announced that they were all going to be neutral, right? They all said, no Russia, no games. You knew damn well that those same coaches, skaters, Plushenko, like, right, coaching skaters, and well, he didn't have certain people at the games, but they turned around. They all went to the Olympics. No one stayed home because of neutrality. So right. I think that the only ones who would stay home now are ones that would really be held down. And I would imagine that the Minister of Sport would give some sort of a directive to send the athletes, unless the government really decides not to send them, which seems against every fiber of their being that we have seen from experience, right, to play games. But I think an interesting thing is that it would take them time to rebuild their quotas. So the next Worlds would not be just Russia, Russia, Russia. They would potentially only have one skater in each discipline at the World Championships, at Europeans. So that also makes it a little more interesting to watch that infighting, see which one competes, right? Yeah. And I think it's a time for the sport to reassess the artistry versus athleticism, and we're going to get into that conversation with the podcast we listened to. But yeah, I think that it will be a journey for what is going to happen. Now, Tarasova and Morozov, the pair skaters, actually filed a lawsuit with the Court of Arbitration for Sport about Russians not being allowed to compete. And I don't know why that team that published this, because they've always been kind of going to retire, right? And that's,
I wonder if that's why.
I wonder if that's why. If they were,
there's no reciprocation coming for them competitively by doing. What
kind of remuneration are they getting for being those people, right? Or what? How is that going to help their careers going on? Also interesting that the ones that were at the big Putin rally were really where I think that there's no way around this. That would be Victoria Sinitsina and Nikita Katsalapov. Well, they are retired, right? And Tarasa Morozov. Now, the interesting thing here is that the doping situation with Valyeva has not been resolved yet, right? And this is why I think that this is going to all be sped up potentially, because if you think about it, Valyeva has never been suspended by the ISU from participation because they didn't take that big stand during the Olympics, how everything happened with the Court of Arbitration for Sport. She could be named to compete in the Grand Prix before this case is even resolved.
Right.
And at the end of the day, because this has taken so long, what if they give her an 18th or 20-month suspension? It's going to be so retroactive that what, she misses the Grand Prix, but she can go to Worlds next year, should she even survive the Eteri timeline, right? They already have a girl doing a quad Lutz, Elisa de Glazina, they have Petrosian, they have Akachieva. Like, how much longer is Valyeva going to even be relevant within Russia for? But we're certainly seeing, you know, that could actually happen. And that's crazy, right? That this, you know, because Russia was held out, nothing was ever sped up. This has all been this game going on that, in a sense, because Russia was held out because of the war, the team medals in the Olympics have just like not been decided. Like they took it, nothing has been,
right.
It's just like lost time. So, yeah.
And one would have thought, like, if you had the sense that maybe you might not be able to get out of this one, why would you not have tried to just sort of push and give her some, if you're the Russian Federation, why not push and give her some sort of suspension that she's playing out when she can't compete internationally anyway?
Of course, but it was
that would be admitting the wrongdoing. Yeah.
I mean, I think ultimately they're asking for a 4-year suspension. What are they going to do? Give 2 years, 18 months, right? It's going to wind up being so unsatisfying because they're going to backdate it.
Right.
Because of this other situation. So it's going to wind up feeling very hollow and unsatisfying one way or another. But I do think that her career is almost done.
Yeah.
So,
but a strange idea that they would backdate it.
Well, they're going to have to, because
as opposed to from the time she would have been eligible to compete internationally.
Just seeing what CAS has done with other athletes, you know, Oleg Vernayev in gymnastics, who took meldonium, another thing, they're most likely going to backdate this to the Olympics. Or no, they'll backdate it to December 25th.
Yeah.
Whatever happens. Now, what they could do is strip them of the team title, right, based on her punishment, have the Russians back in, and everything is kind of hunky-dory, right? But it seems like they will not be allowed in team events. Now they're like, does that mean pairs? I think that means, you know, the Russian team event, team in gymnastics, probably the relays or something along those lines. But yeah, we'll see. But it's certainly not over. And I think it will be fascinating to kind of watch the infighting that they do for that one spot. So,
right.
Yeah. I think things will be so dissected and parsed. Like there was that picture of Kolyada in Russian military garb, but he was celebrating, you know, the anniversary of a battle in St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
But again, it's all very dicey.
That's why I don't know how you quantify someone's neutrality and who is who decides.
But it definitely seems like Bach had some sort of deal with other government entities, or that certain people were tipped off. You know, we saw Diana and Gleb not switch citizenship. They looked into it, they waited, and then at the last moment, they didn't do it. And have the Russians always kind of known that they were coming back? I do think it will be interesting to see what happens with Diana and Gleb. And are they switching or not? Because this week we learned that Alexandra Stepanova and Ivan Bukin are going to Alexander Zhulin, who has a lot of
angriest of the gaslighting committee interviewers.
The said horrible things, homophobic, transphobic things this week, just disgusting, right? About the neutrality for attention and what, you know, who knows, right? What he said, gross.
It makes me my heart break for Maya Usova, who I love. Yeah.
So he is now going to be coaching Stepanov and Bukin. They've both had children. They're coming back, and they're going to work with him. They left Zhuk and Svinin, who they were with for so long at the senior level, to be coached by him. And that's a political juggernaut and an experienced coach and a good team. They would be against Diana and Gleb for potentially one spot. It will be interesting to see what kind of chess game happens, right? Is Eteri going to have her daughter stay in Russia to compete for one spot? Is she going to try to move elsewhere and be with a weaker federation? What is going to happen, right?
But I'm sorry, I would always rather see Angelika's team. I always forget the girl's name that begins with a K.
Kaganovskaya and Angelopol.
Yeah, I would fancy they could surpass Diana and Buchan. You know what I mean? I just think the momentum is on their side, not anyone else's. But
politics of this are going to be so fascinating too.
And also, if indeed, like Russia is able to send one entry for next season, what message do you send with said entry? Especially in terms of the ladies, do you send sort of a declining Valieva and make your statement where she could still feasibly win? Or are you sending a push for the future? It will be very interesting. It will be very telling of where the federation is at based on who they select.
And they've always had so many skaters that are ranked so highly in the ISU rankings, you know, which helps the Grand Prix assignments. This would, I imagine, listen, I think the Grand Prix assignments will come up very late this year, right? I think it's going to take time with this case, right? When it's going to happen. But I think we will see, you know, some of these teams will not have likely as many skaters at each Grand Prix. We always were seeing 3 Russian women almost at every single event. I think it will be reduced. So, and I think it's fair to the rest of the skaters who have held the sport together and been competing that they don't just get pushed aside for 3 Russians coming back everywhere, right? Like I think, yeah, to come back gradually unless they do something else gross coming up. But I imagine that it will be a slower return, but I don't know. Who knows what they'll do?
Back from me, I mean, if you take the entire geopolitical situation out of it, which is very difficult to do, so it's just a hypothetical, but the pairs in Russia are still delivering some really top level, admirable content.
Yes.
You talked about, I love that dance team. The men have been a little all over the map, but someone like Peter, for instance, did a really good job this season of sort of climbing and creating some moments. So it will be interesting to see how some of those people will fit back into the roster. Where I sort of have my moment is that, with the exception of a Tuktamisheva or an occasionally non-Eteri coached female, everyone is such a clone when we're already dealing with a sport that's a discipline that's really struggling with that sort of formulaic approach. That's the discipline where when I start seeing all those programs and those approaches and strategies again, it's going to leave a real bad taste in the mouth. Less so in the other.
I was talking about with Sandra, and I was saying, I think that the formulaic nature of women's skating has been a problem for a long time. And I think that they need to go in and add those choreographic elements, like we even see in Synchro and ice dance, which has moved those disciplines forward. And single skating continues to have this rigid where we see all of the same spins and the same footwork. And I think it's desperately needed. I think
we just happen to be blessed at the moment that a lot of the top men and their teams have figured out how to transcend that.
Yes.
How to rise above those limitations, which are great and should be addressed. However, the men in general seem to think a little bit differently about it, where a lot of the women's programs, I don't know if that's their teams also, it just seems to copy and paste to what has won in the past. And so we have just lost all identity and creativity in so many ways there. And I think these individual skaters are capable of it. It's just not being encouraged, which is why I found, and I don't mean to transition us before we're ready to, you had me listen to.
Can we stop? I just was going to say one thing. I was just going to say, like, I agree with you 100% at the senior level. But if you watch Junior Worlds, where they have to develop this creativity and these positions, I thought that the women were unwatchable, 100 clones. The men struggle, and even at 4 continents, I found a lot of the early men to be devoid of originality of one another. So yes, I just wanted to say that. So I think that is where this could really be. But in the women's skating too, like we're at it, who knows how many more seasons Cowrie has at the top, right? It's going to be a mess, but I think that the sport needs that overhaul. Maybe Sean Ratstadt for doing single skating. I don't know, like we need to get him and follow. If Synchro can make changes, and I force anyone from the ISU to watch junior ladies nonstop, no bathroom break, and tell me that
and tell me you're engaged. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying that's a fault of the skater themselves. They have a team that has clearly done their research and said, this is where we've got to focus. Mm-hmm. And it's just unfortunate because in my opinion, as a fan and as a viewer, it's in all of the wrong spots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I listened to Jeremy Abbott on Paulina's podcast and he agreed with us on all of them. You know, he just was loving Kevin.
Good. I didn't realize she had done that with him.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny? We did all those worlds conversations and I loved all of them, but such varying responses to the different guests.
Always. And then you can't never please people, but you have to realize that people don't, I don't know if you get this too, but people will text me after. There's always a high level of engagement when we have guests on, whether they agree with them or not. And they completely dissect all of their opinions and whatnot, which is why we do it, because we know what each other thinks of these programs by this point of the season, right? And it's kind of like that fun thing for the rest. But yes, there's always, well, I wish it was just you. How come they said this? Oh, I didn't like this person. But by and large, I was very, very
tickles me the most when they clearly don't know who the guest is. And they're like, well, what does she know? And I'm like, oh, do a Google search. Yeah, she knows.
Watch the Renee Roca program from 2000-2001. Everything Must Change. It will change your life. Okay. Yes. Okay. Oh, I watched it Wednesday night. It was so good. Put me in all my feelings and emotions. And we were having an ice dancer judge 2014 Sochi with us, which was very interesting. So, and not as difficult to judge as you might expect, but also
I wouldn't have thought it was difficult. Although I wondered, you know, the
pattern dance is hard to judge, right? Or to dissect that. But if you just go by the levels given and trust that, you can, the judging part is not
right, as opposed to the technical calls. Yeah. Which is what a judge does. They're handed those calls. Yeah.
All right. So let's discuss the podcast. I sent you a podcast about the Daily. I had heard about it the other day and I thought, oh, how interesting, because it wound up relating to skating so much more, but it was about baseball and how Major League Baseball is making.
When you texted me this, Dave, I was like, the hell are you making me listen to a podcast about baseball? But I
have many layers, Jonathan, that people don't know about. Okay, like
including me. I was like, how did you even know this existed? It was amazing.
I'm a person that's interested in the world, Jonathan. Okay, I'd like to know what's going on. All right.
Okay.
Michael Barbaro speaks to me. Okay. He asks, you know, on the Daily, they ask really simple questions, like so much. Like he'll be like, "So what is figure skating?" That's how that would start.
Yeah.
What is? Yeah. Anyway,
Sandra gave a great answer when she did the Radio Lab thing about Surya, where they totally weren't getting what she was describing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think she was so happy with how she was portrayed there as. I don't think that they did.
No, because they tried to scoff at her answers, but had they listened, they would have had all the answers they wanted, but they would have had to have changed the narrative of the show.
I don't think she was the only person on one position, right? So on the other hand, you have Tara and Surya and Tanya, right? Like, so she winds up sounding like an elitist monster, right?
But a purist of edge and blade, as she was describing what figure skating is that's a series of edges and leans in the blade and how you
I think that they loved her and she gave them so much material, but I don't think that they had enough supporting people to really back her there, right? Yeah. And I think that actually, like, I think that there was a good podcast, but I don't think that podcast reached the right conclusion, right? About
they had decided what the conclusion was going to be and then built a show around it.
Yeah, because I think if you were to say that Surya was just robbed, right? But she also, like, it was part of a chasm in the sport about switching between, you know, artistry and athleticism and going, you know, all the way around. It was just, yeah. Anyway. Meanwhile, let's discuss this podcast about baseball, about how they're making changes to make the sport move faster because no one wants to sit for 4 hours to watch a baseball game at 9 innings anymore. So they're putting a pitch clock. They are also doing things to encourage more base play, so that they were talking about how, you know, you can't stack the defense on one side, and they're trying to make it because a ball actually going around the field is more exciting for people, you know, to actually
and
have
everyone waiting 4 hours in case there's one home run.
Yes.
And then and you wrote me and you were like, listen to this and replace the word home run with quads.
Mm-hmm.
And it was blowing my mind at every turn, because it literally was a podcast about figure skating and they didn't know it.
They didn't know it.
They talked about this obsession that they're not trying to reduce the value of home runs, but somehow the entire game has become fixated on waiting for one and getting one and defending against one. I don't know if defending is the right word here, but and so they were like, we don't want to reduce the importance of that, but we also want to encourage the rest of the game to be played.
They want to see stealing of bases, and they want it, right? Like they want to have ground balls and all of those things, right? To say, and it was really making me think about skating so much. God, I really have such brilliant ideas once in a while. Anyway, it's like,
I mean, I literally, my mouth was on.
My mouth dropped when they were talking, and I've known this, right? That when Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa had that home run race in the summer of '98, which was like the biggest thing because they were on track statistically to pass the record, and it was these two guys and they had these big arms, and then it came out that they were taking human growth hormone, and it was all of this stuff was being
a very excellent South Park spoof was written about that, and I highly recommend it. Yeah, okay.
So anyway, but they said the obsession with home runs led to higher uses of performance enhancing drugs. What about the obsession with quads, Jonathan, right? And then you say—
You don't have to say it. We're all there, yeah.
But then it also led to this technique that we see from the Eteri school, right? And then they said, like, are these records real or not? Are these quads real or not, right? All of these things. And I also thought they were talking about how the amount of time a ball is not in play, like on a base, right? That it is up to 4 minutes, and it used to be 3 minutes, meaning that someone used to just like have a ground ball or a single or a double. And I know that I'm not saying this in the right way. Everyone's going to make comments and laughing. And listen, I'm not the biggest, I'm not a baseball writer.
Comparison, yes.
I'm not a baseball writer, but so I'm not verbalizing this correctly, right? But think about it when people are doing quads. We see more pops, more falls, sloppier programs, less choreography.
Less programs, yeah.
Less programs.
No facial involvement, yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that we want no quads in the same way that Babe Ruth had home runs and other people did. But this obsession with just home runs, they said that people are hitting the ball differently. It's angled up more, right? And that makes them miss more. And you think about it like—
and everyone in the field is in a different position in anticipation that the person is always going to be aiming to achieve a home run, nothing else. But I also think it sells the audience short. Like that kind of narrative of, will there be a home run record broken? Will there be a quad we've never seen before? To me, that usually plays for not the super fan. That plays to draw in someone else, so they're suddenly engaged in waiting for something and understanding something. And that true fans of the sport themselves don't just want to see home run, they want to see great play. And we don't want to just see some jump we've not seen before. We also want to see it integrated into a beautiful program. The comparisons never stop, because then he went to, and I'm not quite sure of his title, whoever's in charge.
The baseball commissioner.
The commissioner. Yeah, I knew it was not like the word I would use. Dave Lee for the sports reference of the day. The commissioner is not involved in baseball.
No,
like this is just like skating, where they're like, we're dealing with someone who's trying to do the right thing, has never played, has never coached, is totally from outside of this world. And of course, in skating, we see that all the time. And I'm not ready to transition out of this, but this would have made a good transition to talk about the new CEO of United States figure skating, Tracy Merritt.
But anyway, I thought it was great because there's so many people. Well, you can't have, like, Ari Zakarian is saying that they didn't give Ilya enough points for the quad axel, but he didn't really have a program, in my opinion. But other people think he did, right? Like, there's so many different opinions about this. But
so let's talk about cultivating an audience for figure skating. And if you show three, I don't know the right term here, laymen, I don't, three non already established fans, the Shoma free, the Junwan free, and the Ilya free. And I would be very intrigued which program gets the response, even though there's the hype of a quad axle that's done within the first 10 seconds or whatever. And now what are we watching afterwards? And I think that you would find if you just grab any random person off the street, they're going to respond to the silver and medal finishes in the men's event much more than the third, despite the accomplishment.
Yeah, and I think Shoma was wonderful. He also has the reputation coming in, right? He has that extra gravitas, but I think that result will be debated. But he's been a name for so long in the sport. It's kind of like Katarina Witt winning, right? Towards the end, how can you compete with that kind of a name?
But I think even if you knew nothing of his reputation and saw those three guys, you're responding to the performers that are also doing the athletic moments, you know?
But I did have a friend message me that this was the first year that he couldn't watch every single man compete. And so I thought that because it was kind of informing our discussion and what he said, and Scott, and he's an intelligent person that, you know, writes to us and different things. And he said the commentary, the Australian woman, was top notch. She means Belinda. She said some remarks that I found to be really insightful. So keep her around. I was just about halfway finished writing a sentence about pairs being underwhelming, but then I thought that is really the problem. It's more like I am tired of seeing all these humans do things on the ice that are ugly for the purpose of getting points, hoping to win a competition where they're supposed to be aiming to marry the physical with beauty. Amen. Right. It's just so many ugly positions. Yeah, spirals are largely gone, but I sure see some ugly ass positions at the end of each camel spin, ugly and slow, which is worse than just ugly. How do I show non-skating people this is skating when I have to be apologetic about how each spin will have an ugly position because of points? How can Jason be the only skater who gets it? How? And if judges seem to agree that he gets it, then the components for everyone else should be a point or two lower, like automatically. And I'm tired of Shoma's landings. If I want to watch it, let's just Disney. Okay, he's going on. But yeah, it was fantastic. Like, he basically is, you know, a purist who is.
And more to the point, that's what Megan was talking about, that there is no pairs person with pairs experience on the committees that are making these decisions. And we talked about it in our recap with her. Every lasso lift, save one or two, you were like, oh gosh, that is so not pleasing. And if you were to go back, 94, come on, obviously we're obsessed with Gordieva Grinkov, and I did love the Rachmaninoff of Mishkichana and Dmitriev. We did have something very crowd-pleasing in the Brasseur and Eisler performance, which it was reminding you that pairs is this crazy feat where a man is just hurdling his female partner all over the place, and that excites an audience. And maybe it is not as complex and it didn't do 85 different positions while doing that one lift, but it still gives you that wow factor.
Or that soothing of watching Jenny and Todd in 5th place, right? They just were so lovely and elegant and musical. And
why does it have to be complicated in order to be rewarded? And I don't know that
maybe want to skate so badly. But I was going to ask you, because I was thinking about this and I wrote this down. When in skating do you think there was the best balance of artistry and athleticism? Because I think that everyone would have a different answer, right?
Yeah, because now we're not talking about when great artists married.
We're not talking about
athleticism. It's when the depth was kind of all kind of doing
it. Because there needs to be enough athleticism, because this is a sport, and there needs to be enough artistry. And I think it's different for different disciplines, maybe. But for me, in terms of the men, I think really 87 through 94. And that's men that had
women 90 to 98, or you know, somewhere in that.
They had the figures background, right? And they had that technical ability, but then they also had enough artistic point. Like Boitano's program, to me, I mean, he did attempt a quad at different competitions at the 88 Worlds and other events. He, had two-footed it or, made minor errors and it wasn't ratified. But to me, like, that's a great balance of a program. It was athletic. It had so many connecting steps. It had power, right? And Brian Orser's program, intricate, fantastic. If you watch that from 88 Worlds, right? Victor Petrenko's program at the 88 Olympics, if you watch the whole thing, absolutely stunning. Kurt Browning doing the first quad at the 88 Worlds. You saw Joseph Zabobchik in 86 do a quad that was ratified for a number of weeks, right? And fantastic jumping, right? Where it was big jumps, big expansive skating, big edges. And to me, part of skating has always been the marriage of speed with musicality, with athleticism. And I think that under the IJS, because you have to think so much, that we don't see the same kind of speed because it requires a mental abandon that I don't think is possible.
Physically slows you down. The step
Physically
sequence
and mentally, right? You have to think a certain way, right? When you have to make sure there's just so much more on your mind, how could you be as free, right? And I think there's something about skating that has that intrinsic, subjective quality. And of course, I think the scoring of all of this takes far too long, and I don't know the right way of, if there's ever a way around it. Women, I think it's, a little different. To me, that 94 pairs competition was the greatest thing we've ever seen. I think, 2002 for pairs was actually a great competition, right? You may not have liked
2018 in many ways.
Yeah, you might not have liked the results in 2002, right? But I think that the actual performances, that was a great competition, right? That was thrilling. 2002 women, some great programs, some not. Women's skating has always struggled, right? In terms of the level of depth all the way throughout the field. I think 96 is kind of like a sweet spot where you have a number of different skaters doing a number of things well, for me.
Yeah, in their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, 96 women is maybe the ideal. I think the technical content in 96 for the men was great, but the artistry was starting to wane with particular men at the top, right? It was becoming less. But I think that 94, those programs, even the ones, if you watch, Victor Petrenko and Brian Boitano at 93 Skate America, and early, you see a great balance. So I don't know. I think ice dance is the only discipline where I could say, I think it's better now.
Yeah, much. When we went back and judged 98 dance, and we did that with Mark Henretti, all three of us were sort of like, whoa, no wonder people took this less seriously at the time, because it was so easy to just give a mark. And now I think the kind of ice dancing being done now, there's no comparison. And I think they did it right.
Yeah, I think that 2018 competition will go down as legendary in many respects for many years. I think that was maybe the peak of having, I think when you have a competition where it could go either way, to me, that's always the best, right? Yeah. I love to sit there and I would want to sit, over
watch it unfold. Yeah. What? And watch it unfold.
Watch it unfold and also have a debate for years later about who was really better.
Yeah.
Which program and why, because that means that both were fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I want to have. I think that debate is fun when it's fair, right? I think that there's a lot when it's not fair.
And even in the early 90s, for instance, where we saw domestically women's skating sort of splintering into, oh, you're the artist and you're the athlete. But let's not forget, Chris Yamaguchi was considered the artist, but she's still doing triples and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And even though Tanya was a jumper and by no means a ballerina, she wasn't trusova either.
Yeah.
She did have quality spins. She did have quality edges. The skating skills and the speed, all those other things were still a part of it. It wasn't like all of one or all of the other and nothing else. And again, like you say, maybe that's figures. I don't know what it is, but something needs to just be recalibrated. And like you said, even when dance started, dance is always trying. So that, okay, now we're going to do this choreographic slide. Now we're going to do this choreographic movement. Now we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And they almost have to tell you, we will reward you for beauty and creativity in this spot, which of course blows my mind because I think it should be the whole program. But I think something like that needs to happen in the singles disciplines as well.
Yeah.
And so much of, I think, like a person on the street thinks of figure skating. They think of like big, open, expansive, wind through the hair, kind of like speeding down the ice moment. And like you said, the concentration pulls every skater in and down. And they're just looking at their feet doing all these little clusters that nobody cares about except for the technical panel. And we sort of lost the point. I don't even know that it's the scoring system. It's what they valued as difficult and worthy of getting levels and points that need the adjustment.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. This is lots to think about, right? I don't know. I think I go back to that 88 to 94 era of men, of the Brownings and the Petrenkos and the Filipowskis and so on and so forth. So yeah, interesting. Also, Eteri gave an interview this week, Jonathan.
Oh, dear Lord.
We love a gaslighter on this show.
Yeah,
you know,
I was just gonna say, speaking of gaslighting.
I love this too.
Did she bare her soul? Did she clear it all out?
I mean, I was gaslit the other day, like you would not believe. Okay, but I was calling it out.
Now you can spot it. Yeah.
All right. Eteri was saying, you know, she only weighs the girls to make sure that they don't lose weight, Jonathan.
Of course. Yeah. And then again, these are when you need like one of those late night show guys to do the comparisons to then say, I had just spit out my water.
Yes. Like,
you know, or I think hydration is important.
And then, remember Zagitova being like, I had to spit out my water. You don't want to have more grams on you. Like literally on the same website, right? I thought, right. Oh my goodness, this is crazy. She gave an interview to Leki and really delivered. But they say that the gaslighter has to gaslight themselves first. So they have to almost believe it before they can say it.
Yeah, that's what I always wonder. When you're in a position like Eteri, are you literally just deny, or do you start to convince yourself that you really are doing the right thing?
Oh, I think they convince themselves that absolutely doing the right thing. Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting because she has not done that many interviews.
Jonathan, that man loved you. He just needed to cheat on you because you were emotional, right?
It's your fault. Yeah.
He did not contact you because you threatened him with, you know, exposing him.
It's not happened to me, by the way, in case any viewers starts being like, what happened with Jonathan and Josh? That's not what's going on.
He was respecting your boundaries. You know?
Yeah. Isn't this what you want? Yeah.
I was being so respectful of your boundaries. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
I was surprised she did this one and not another. I was intrigued. Why this one? Why now? If she just felt enough time had gone past or something like that.
At Worlds, it was all attention is good attention. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
She was starved of attention. Did you see how minimized she looked this season, right? I think we'll see her rejuvenated next season.
And whether you are an Eteri fan or not, obviously nothing she can say in any of these interviews will sway either side to believe anything else. So I kind of skimmed it, saw some of the clips and was like, oh, forget it.
I know. Oh, man.
But the article that did interest me was this Tracy Merrick article.
Okay.
And so I have
from
to be
Cleveland Cavaliers, and who played there but LeBron James. Look at me knowing the sports knowledge, okay? Yes, and then LeBron went to Miami, and that really upset everyone in Cleveland, and then he went back, okay? Yes, all right, I was once at my friend's house, and her husband was like glued to the announcement of where LeBron was gonna go.
Oh, cool.
Not just a hat rack. All right.
But
look at me being so butch, right?
Yes. To that point, so I think the conversation you and I just had in real time mimics those of many skating fans in that there are a great deal of skating fans that are also invested in other sports. also love baseball and basketball and gymnastics, much more common, obviously. And then there's those of us that come from more of a performance background that if we're not watching skating, we're going to a show or we're
really
going
should watch 80s gymnastics, because what are you not doing, right? Okay.
Well, actually, what blew my mind, you were sending me some Soviet gymnasts from like early 80s, and I was floored at how gorgeous all of it was.
Oh, yes.
I didn't know that kind of tumbling was possible.
Oh.
It was
And the dance, Jonathan, okay?
I was like, goodness. Because there's always been that thing where the Soviet female skaters from the 80s.
The Soviet gymnasts were not like the Soviet female skaters, no.
And that's what was always so confusing, because they're like the pairs girls of that era were so stunning and refined. And then you would get these single skaters that you were like, I wonder what.
I think I'm a queen about skating. Talk to me about 80s gymnastics, okay? You will see like the person's flying on the mat.
Okay. Well, but I mean, again, so I think you're dealing with half a sports crowd, half a performance crowd. And it's always interesting. This woman clearly comes from the world of just full-blown sport. And, when she's talking about her like big moment in Ohio or whatever, when she figured out a way to have confetti that didn't get in the fans' beer, I was like, really? Like, I would rather.
She was adding to the experience, Jonathan, of that game.
But here's, I think, where USFS has always gotten it wrong. We don't want it to feel like a hockey game. And I could just be projecting. I don't want to feel like I'm at a hockey game when I am at a figure skating event.
I do think you want to feel excitement and grandeur, and some of that's lost, right?
Perhaps, but
it depends what your view of skating is. To me, there's nothing more thrilling than seeing Dick and Peggy in black tie, or doing the skating event.
But they did Landover, and it was this sort of, and even as we saw in Saitama, the audience treats it like this important, pressure-filled like moment of performance.
I love when people are like, figure skating is elitist, and it's like, sure is.
Yeah,
that's why we loved it, right? Like,
100%. So suddenly I'm already like, this is the same thing that happens sometimes in opera, is they have like reduced like newspaper publication staffs and all this sort of stuff. You don't get a music reviewer or an opera reviewer, you get an arts reviewer. So the person with a dance background is now writing kind of important reviews about singing or the violin or a play or something like that. And it's just not the insight you're looking for. And I just think, listen, I don't know this woman at all, and I hope she's great, and I'm sure she's very qualified. It's just another example of trying to mimic other sports when we have a unique sport on our hands that is both performance and sport. And I would love to see someone performance-driven giving their insight into this organization, someone who ran a massive ballet company or a huge Broadway organization or something like that.
Oh, just ask Dick Button. Just get him to do it.
We should have listened to him about the union.
How to have competitions that Robin Cousins could win, anything, okay?
Well, you could talk to Carlo.
He was right about all of it. You know what? He was right about those layback positions too. Okay, yes.
He was. So I'm intrigued where this goes.
You know what I want to hear Dick say? Blur. When he talks about the blurring of a spin. That's, yes.
Which basically is not allowed anymore because there's no time for it and it can't get points. Yeah. So instead, we're going to watch a slow motion spin in real time. Yeah.
Anyway, yes. Yeah. Where were we going? Oh, yes. Also, Johnny Weir announced his skating academy that he is going to have. And it looks like Gracie Gold is going to be coaching for him. So that would be interesting. And then also in that area, and I think he's around like the Wilmington rink. I don't know if he's going to be doing it at Wilmington, but in Aston, Pennsylvania, Victor Pfeiffer, who worked with Alyssa Liu and has worked with Young Yu, he is moving from Colorado to Aston, which is the 4-ring complex where they had Liberty all those years. And he is teaming up with Eva Martinek, who coaches Naoko Rossi, Tobia Euler, and she used to be Miriam Ziegler's coach of Ziegler and Kifa. So that is some more skating coming to the East Coast, and it kind of shakes things up a little bit. So that will be Interesting. And then next week we have the World Team Trophy, and this is one of the, I'm looking forward to the World Team Trophy. I don't know. I feel excited to see all of our friends one more time.
Yeah. I mean, and it was interesting to see some of the selections. Like Brady had come out with an article where she was clearly trying to tell everyone she wanted to go to World Team Trophy. And then of course was not chosen. They're sending
good money.
Number. Yeah.
It's good money. You build that profile in Japan, you build the audience. And I have to say there's some good skaters that we're going to see. It's Steven Gogolev, Keegan Messing. Interesting that Gogolev is going over Conrad Orzel, who was at Worlds, but he had his blade break at Worlds, but they're giving Gogolev the nod now because they were kind of the debated factor for the world team. Kevin Amos and Adam Siohimfa for France, Daniel Grosso, Matteo Rizzo, Kazuki Tomono and Shoma Uno. So Kazuki getting it over Soda, going by the world's ranking there, and definitely from our enjoyment in terms of performers, I'm thrilled with that. Junhwa Cha and Seong Lee, Jason Brown and Ilya Molinin. For the women, Sarah Maud Dupuis, Madeline Skizis, Lauren Schild, Leah Serna, Laura Naki-Gutman, Anna Pizzetta, Mai Mihara, Kaori Sakamoto, Yilim Kim, Hyan Lee, Amber Glenn, and Isabel Levito. Deanna and Max, Camille Kovalev and Pavel Kovalev, Sarah Conti and Nicolo Machi, Riku and Ruichi, Eugene Cho, I totally butchered that, by the way, and Stephen Adcock.
I think they say Unjin. Yeah.
Okay. Alexa and Brandon, Piper and Paul, Eva and Jeffrey from France, Charlene Guinard, Marco Fabri, Kana and Daisuke, Hannah Lim and Kwan Yi, Madison Chalk and Evan Bates. So a very interesting kind of... It's
a re-showdown for a lot of these.
Yeah. I want to see Deanna get that free skate this time and nail it. Can Alexa and Brandon go out on top? Who knows? I'm excited to see it, and hopefully there's a great crowd.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. And I like to watch this rivalry between the Frenchmen. That's just thrilling. And
yeah,
is Kevin going to be emotional? What's going to happen? Like what?
But as you stated, he does strike me as a skater that's going to have that one great outing a season. And as he has had his, what does that mean for World Team Trophy? Obviously, you hope everyone can back it up, but I think we could see some very interesting shifting in between what happened at Worlds and now.
Will we get to see him and Sylvia together? Like, will the coach be there? Will there be crying?
Or is everyone with a frickin' foam finger and like a big funny hat sitting in there kiss and cry?
Remember when Scott Moyer said he hated the World Team Trophy?
Yeah, and you know what? I appreciate him for saying it because there's something very exciting about the format. I don't know why it just has to look like an elementary school assembly in the kiss and cry.
Well, I think that like you could get into a World Team Trophy if you could plan it, because you love a theme party. You love a placemat. You love a theme.
With a napkin ring and a placemat holder. However, there's something, the kind of silliness that it does makes it seem childlike and almost detracts from the gravitas of the competition itself. Instead of sort of like fun cheering on, it seems a farce. I don't know. Something about it just never sat right with me.
It was not your event, okay? Yeah.
No.
Also, we had Synchro Worlds this week, which I really enjoyed watching. Les Suprêmes were Suprême for the second year, back-to-back world titles. In synchronized skating, they won in Lake Placid. I thought that they had a really great, innovative program. They've made a lot of changes to the rules in synchronized skating. So if you haven't watched it since like 2015 or 2016, it looks vastly different than when we first started covering it on here.
Yes.
Yes. And it's way more modern, right?
I don't know, my own hot take as an outsider for Synchro. I have watched it, in the past. It has never drawn me in. But I think like you're saying, like the ice dance changes, it's making it more interesting for me to engage now. And I have to say, actually, it was the second place team that I think was their fall may have.
Yes, that program, when they did the lift and she had the arched back, I was like, yes, it was dynamic.
And that they had this like bell opening, and so the woman was like up, and then she like swung down. And these were very interesting performative things to do. I mean, in general, where I still struggle a little bit at times with the synchro teams, especially, and we'll talk about this, like the Hayden Nats did this, where there are these long, super flowy, like ice dance skirts. And because there's so many, and oftentimes it's like individual clusters are doing different things, it becomes very visually difficult for me to sort of take in the picture. So I found a big jump up for me actually with the top 3 teams, and then 4th and 5th. Like I saw a big leap forward in the ability. But I thought that the Rockettes free skate was just sensational. And the group lifts were very interesting to me. And a lot of these death spiral moments were also fascinating. And it does seem, just as an outside viewer, I don't know what the inner workings are like, that it seems to encourage a bit more diversity than the other disciplines, which I like.
It's been growing, and I also like that they do the jump elements. They have these choreographic elements that I think are really interesting visually.
Well, some of the choreographic moments were like killer, but for instance, sometimes you would see someone just sort of like whip out a single axel amidst a whole bunch of other stuff. And for me as a viewer, sometimes that came across as a bit more random.
Forced,
forced is a good word for it, But, and if I say it in, about other skaters, I have to say it about the synchro people, because this like techno Moonlight Sonata, and then in the middle of it, we get one line of Un Bel Di from Madama Butterfly, and I was like, I'm not really understanding this Les Suprêmes situation. I was less responsive to them, and both of the Finnish teams like hooked me in right away.
I mean, I think they were all fantastic. I think overall, Les Suprêmes were great, but I think that fall from the Rockettes really cost. I was really enjoying that free skate. I thought it was really dynamic and sharp.
Yeah, it was just incredible. And so when they do the death spiral, they categorize it as a pair element in the score box, but theirs was just incredible. Just incredible.
I enjoyed it. I think it's a discipline that's moving in the right direction overall.
Yeah, because then is the number always 16? Is that what the number is?
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I mean, my own weird.
It used to be more. When it used to be called precision, you watch any of those old clips.
Yeah. And then it's you almost want like the New York Rockettes, where you almost want everyone the same size and body type for
really encouraging diversity. But
I know. But even they're doing these incredible things where they're spinning and then they're pulling the leg up and doing all of this incredibly difficult stuff that we see the pairs can't get in sync.
I watched the Rockettes in the Thanksgiving Day parade. Oh, remember like one year they had like the xylophones on their back? Oh, it was great. Okay.
But of course you can achieve all that look because everyone has to be the same height. And of course you were seeing some very
tall shaming, short shaming, Jonathan. Gosh, promoting.
It's me. I have to own the height because it's all I've got going for me. But, and do they say Nexus or Nexus?
Nexus.
Okay. They had some like really cool lift moments, and they were creating patterns that were easy for my eye to take in and understand. It was pretty cool.
And they have that coach that's really responsible for a lot of the skating skills drills that are passed around in Canada that are really
okay.
That's why they always have such good skating skills, but they did seem a little bit more rigid, this team overall, to some of their teams. I know it's been a younger team, and it seems like they're more, I got a sense that they were adjusting to the new rules rather than embracing them fully. And really, there's just something about the Quebecois team is just really a little bit more modern. But I think that the Nexus team has purer skating, but it almost seems a little bit Nancy Kerrigan-ish, right?
I understand exactly what you mean by that. Yeah. But what they were able to, I thought they were thriving most in their lift moves.
Yeah.
nexus. Yeah, those were the most exciting moments for me.
I thought their opening was cool. I just thought that the program overall wasn't as dynamic as what the top teams did.
Yeah.
And I thought that the Haydenettes had a good program, but the skating skills weren't as good as the other teams. And it was just inherently a little bit less dynamic, right? It didn't have the wow
It was,
factor.
for me, visually, a lot of clutter, a lot of like smaller, subtler hand movements and turns and things like that, that when there's that many people on that big a surface, it's hard for me to sort of appreciate that subtlety. I almost needed broader strokes artistically for me to sort of get behind them. And they were ones then where I get that the skirts, they were very beautiful. It has nothing to do with the overall aesthetic of it, but when they're moving and there's that many people and it's sort of some cluttered movement, it just became like a blur of visual chaos.
There's something about the Les Supreme costumes, which they kind of wore this costume last year in a different color. It kind of hides when their synchronicity isn't perfect, right? And
what I would be looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was picking the
I don't know if anyone notices that, but it's something about the way that they style them, where like that it's a visual trick, but it works. So it's less glaring like a sore thumb. So yeah,
I have to say it had been a while since I had watched, because I really just want Esther Williams doing like a water ballet every time I watch something like this.
Yes.
But a huge step forward since the last time I watched Synchro.
Yeah.
Really dynamic skating from everyone all around.
Yeah. Good music. It was good. So
yeah.
Oh my God, I was watching this show the other day on Apple TV, Shrinking, about the therapy. It's a good show, worth an afternoon binge, right? But they were playing this song at the end, and I was like, oh my God, this could be a skating song. Like we shouldn't even say it. It's just coming, right? Like I could just like feel it coming. It had all of like the saccharine qualities.
I'm ready for some out there goofy artistic choreographer to just do it to an audiobook. We're getting closer and closer with some of these programs with all of the like overlap dialogue. I was like, oh my gosh. Crazy.
I got to see Sandra choreograph like from afar, and it was just like
magic. Would feel like therapy to me. Yeah.
It really is. She really, it's like,
What is skating? Why is skating? Like
the passion to skate, right? She's just
supposed to move your arm here on this note because it gets a level. Yeah.
She actually choreographs to the music, which is not really.
What a novel concept.
But no, Jonathan, it's really not done very often.
And that is utterly ridiculous to me. Because again, the music tells you what to do. It's all there. You pick the right music. The music will guide you every way, and you can fit in everything you need to. If you just listen to the music, it will tell you where to put it.
Usually the way that you do is like you play the music, you come up with the step sequence, and you kind of fit it to the music by adding the arms rather than organically doing it. Although at this point, I've of course like fit my step sequence to the music, right? But it's just, I'm a very expressive person. Had a lot of, it's going to come out, yeah.
Did you say you're a 30 Rock guy or not really?
Not really.
I always liked it for the one-liners, but they are talking about, because it's like a Saturday Night Live type of show that they're writing for. And at one point a boss comes in and they're like, we need more merchandise with slogans on it. So can you work from a catchphrase and work backwards to create a scene for the catchphrase? And I was like, that's exactly what they do in skating with the choreography. They have the steps and they're now going to force it into some music. Crazy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Golden Edge, it looks sexy, everyone. But